Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe, and before we dive into this week's fantastic episode, we haven't even recorded yet, so that's, I don't know, it might be good. Who knows? Let's give it a go, Mark, shall we?
Who knows? Yeah.
We've shown up enough times. But we would like to thank everyone who sponsors this show. That's you, our patrons out there in patron land. Thank you so much to everyone. And today we have a new patron. We have Susan Holmes. What a brilliant... I think that is that as a character name, that would definitely fly, wouldn't it, as a surname?
Sherlock, next generation of Sherlock, solving crimes, absolutely.
So thank you, Susan, for joining
you, Susan.
the BXP crew. And if you would like to be like Susan and you would like to join our exclusive Facebook group and get all of the incredible deep dives that we've done over the many years now, amazing content, pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. And if you'd like to go even deeper with Mark and I as your coaches, then pop over to the Academy at academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Mr. Stay, have you had a chance to have a breather, or has the year just been like running away like a train still?
I am so busy. It's good. It's all good. I mean, none of it's really paying. The money's all over there on the horizon, Just today, got a film script out the door to some producers, which is really exciting. It's a very exciting project. All I'm going to say is rom-com musical. There you go.
Rom-com.
There's a slight pivot.
It's a slight pivot, but like rom-com, it's all in the news right now. I saw an article this morning on the BBC about a rom-com's making a comeback. So you just time it. And there's something about Meghan and Harry pivoting to rom-com.
Not me.
No, I know, but apparently that there's been a bit of a backlash against their docos, so their production deal with Netflix is going to focus on rom-coms apparently. So anyway, you're obviously on the right tack there.
It's a feel-good movie. It's a definite feel-good movie. It's gonna make us all smile and have us dancing in the aisles if it comes out the way we want it to, and I think it will. So yeah, it's all fantastic, all good stuff. And then line edits. I'm just in line edits. Joy. I'm just this novel I'm writing with Claire, which we'll talk about in the extended edition a bit more.
Okay.
We're at the line edit stage before I send it to my agent and see if he likes it and wants to sell it. So it's...
we have to let people know we've got tons and tons of new listeners since the Richard Armitage episode, which went viral on YouTube.
You wonderful people,
Hello to all Richard Armitage fans. We're so grateful for you to be with us, and welcome to the experiment. And but for people that don't know, when you mentioned Claire is your wife, and Claire wrote a book with a 200-word challenge.
She did.
And did it in less than a year, didn't she? It was 9 months.
Did the first draft, and then she would give me the story is basically she'd give me a draft and then I give her notes. She'd go away, rewrite it. We did this 3 times, and then it was over the summer. We've started referring to the book as the kitchen because we need a new kitchen, right? It's gone from rustic to doors falling off. Okay, so we need a new kitchen, and we jokingly refer to the kitchen in the vain hope that the Advance might get us a new kitchen.
I love it.
And Advances being what they are these days, it probably won't, but you never know. So, and all through the summer, which is her busiest time of year because she's a gardener, I said, "How's the kitchen coming on?" She said, "I'm really tired. It's really, really exhausting." And I'd given her notes, and we're at the stage after 3 drafts. It's real nitpicky stuff. Okay, it's real, And we were watching telly one night. I said, "How's the kitchen?" She said, "I'm really tired, really tired." I said, "Do you want me to have a go at it?" And she grabbed my hand. She said, "I've been waiting for you to say that." So I've basically taken over. So I'm rewriting it and I'm giving her what I've written, and she's giving me notes, and we're polishing. So that's where we are at the moment. And we're just at the stage now where we're about to send it out to my agent. And it's,
ties in nicely with our guest, but we're not going to go there yet because there's some more stuff. I just want to bring up something that's a bit of an elephant in the room, Mark, to be honest. And I think there's a lot of people thinking the same thing, but is this the only time in a loving long-term marriage relationship that you can give your wife notes?
Well, I have directed her in plays, you see.
Oh, Matt.
So approach with caution.
I was going to say you're definitely a better man than I'm, man. If you can get through that, But what a great way of collaborating together on something.
Well, that's what it is.
Being parents, right? It's lovely to be able to
It is a collaboration. It is a collaboration. And Claire and I've known Claire since we were teenagers, so we know each other well enough to say, that's cobblers. Don't tell me that. Whatever. So it's a very open,
worked through
an
all that
honest
stuff early
relationship.
on. Yeah.
Years ago.
Brilliant.
People say to me, particularly like with the Woodville books, they say, you write female characters really well, for a man. And I say, well, when I would write roles for Claire, and she'd go, I'm not saying that. That's rubbish, so you'd sit and you'd listen and improve, and it's only taken me 30 years to sort of get my head around it. So
it's good progress.
Slow learner.
talking of theatre and directing, I went to see my youngest has all into theatre now. It's absolutely brilliant. Keeps getting like lead roles and all the local things going
brilliant
on. But I got to see her yesterday play Grimsby in Little Mermaid.
Right.
Playing this, my 14-year-old daughter playing this aristocratic, 60-year-old English gentry bloke.
Brilliant.
But the thing that was absolutely fantastic about it is it was like right at the beginning of the play. I think Prince Eric and Grimsby come out, and the ship's all over the place. And my daughter is like, she didn't tell me, but she's got like full on tash. And I just for the first 5 minutes, I'm just looking at it thinking, oh my gosh, she's got like a moustache. And it's brilliant. She looked absolutely, so congratulations, Desi. She did such a great job of it. But yeah, I've got photos of her with her moustache with her 19-year-old brother. It was very fun.
That's how I started. First in school theatre, and then in local theatre, which gets fobbed off as it's Amdram. I learned so much from doing that. You do a bit of everything. You work backstage, you work on props, you do, and you get on stage, and it's wonderfully collaborative. I learned a lot, and that inspired me to go on and start. Claire and I to start our own theatre company, and then write my own plays, and here we are now. So it's a great place to learn stuff.
Yeah. I want to just tell you a little heartwarming story about that, because when my daughter first got into trying theatre, she'd never done a proper production before, and the first production she ever got involved with was Godspell, the musical. Oh yeah. And Jen, my wife, everyone who's kind of like heard the backstory of what happened with Jen, when she went to film, she went to theatre directing. That was her thing, and she directed in Cambridge at the Arts Theatre, like one big theatre. Wow. Her first ever production was Godspell, and it was such an amazing moment that my daughter's first play that she was ever in happened to also be the first play that my wife ever directed, and it was just like a lovely moment. So a lovely connection there for daughter and mum. Be it that Jen couldn't be there to kind of experience and watch it, and she'd have loved it if she was. But just a lovely moment, and just how that happened to tie all together. Brilliant.
Well, that's fascinating. There's another, been doing this 6.5 years now. We're learning something new. Your wife has directed theatre. My wife's directed theatre.
Really?
Right, I'm just going to show you something. And viewers on YouTube, you're going to get a little treat. I'm just going to take my headphones off and just show you something. 1 second. Because Claire directed a stage version of Harvey. Which was on the stage first, then made into a brilliant movie with Jimmy Stewart, where he's got talking to a 6-foot invisible rabbit. And one of the key things in that is there's a portrait of Jimmy Stewart's character and the rabbit, which Claire had to get made for her production. So wait there, have a look. If I open this door,
I feel like I need Mark's running off. He's running out.
Seen it there.
He's running out of the room. I feel like I need to. Oh my gosh. That couldn't have been more perfectly placed for the podcast. It's like literally that could have been more perfectly placed, Mark. Right there by the door. It's like da-da.
It's I mean, if I leave it open and do a Zoom call, people go, "What the hell is that?"
It's like Donnie Darko. It's like Donnie Darko from a distance. Yeah, fantastic.
That's a lovely guy called. Yeah, Lou Livesey. He looks like Santa Claus, big white, but it couldn't be more different from Jimmy Stewart. But he was lovely in the role. So yeah, that's what that is. That is out there. So yeah,
isn't that brilliant? Well, to everyone out there who loves and supporting theatre, brilliant. Go for it. Go and see a local. If you haven't been to the theatre recently, go and see a local production. Just open the paper, see what's on, and go support your local theatre, because it's just an incredible group of people. The amount of work they put in,
Yeah.
the set building, like some of the set building in these local
It's
theatres,
amazing.
like, they're absolutely phenomenal. So go support people in local theatre, and great way to kind of get excited about story, and there's nothing like live theatre. It's absolutely brilliant.
Definitely.
Brilliant, Mark. Well, listen, I think we better dive in, and talking of like siblings and relationships within families, let's talk about our guests today.
This is, guests plural. So this is Zack and Michael Urlocker, who are twin brothers writing team. So I think that's the first for the podcast. And their debut novel, The Man from Mittelwerk, it's a murder mystery in that kind of classic 50s noir style. It has elements of science fiction, time travel, twins, the aftermath of World War II. It's terrific stuff. So we discuss tips for collaboration, accepting gifts from strangers, and why brute force can solve any writing problem. And just as a clue, because I was listening back to this and thinking, which one is which? You hear Zack's voice first in this when I asked the question.
Good luck with that. Brilliant stuff. No, this is a fantastic interview, folks. You're going to love this. So let's sit back and enjoy this excellent interview with Mark chatting with the lovely Zack and hilarious Mike Urlocker. Zack and Michael Urlocker, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today, folks?
Good. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark.
It's wonderful to see you both, and it's not often we get co-authors together, and it's even rarer. This might be a first. I think it's the first time we've had twins in over 6 years of the podcast. But you've written a book together under the pseudonym MZ Urlocker. See if you can figure that one out, folks. And it's the Man from Mittelwerk. So, gents, tell us about this book.
Well, it began a few years ago. So I had always wanted to write a book, a novel, and Michael and I both like the same kind of authors. Philip Kerr, Raymond Chandler, these types of people, and NaNoWriMo had come around, National Novel Writing Month, in November, and I thought, I've been thinking about this and outlining, let me actually commit and write a draft.
I think you were unemployed too, right?
Yes, I was between jobs. Right. So that gave me some free time. And so I wrote the first draft during NaNoWriMo. And that was about 50,000 words, declared victory. And then,
should have stopped there.
4 years later, we had a finished book. So it was a long process.
That's yes, you've skipped right to the end there, Zack. But we've got Michael interjecting there. So, Zack, you wrote this alone in NaNoWriMo. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, Michael, when did you come into the process?
So Zack, and by the way, that's not his real name. Zack had sold the book to a publisher. You'd think it must have been sight unseen, and then he started. And I had looked at it and had offered some commentary, and at some point, I think it was January 2018. Is that right?
Yeah.
Zack kind of did the old Tom Sawyer thing and said, "Hey, I'm having such fun writing this book. If you're lucky, I might let you help." And I got suckered into that. I used to be a journalist, so the first task was Zack put me in charge of technical things.
Technical things. So, is that how you divvied up the labor? Did you focus on particular aspects of the story and then sort of circle back to it on
No,
each
it was
other?
mostly Mike complained about the writing in some parts. And I said, well, why don't you see if you can edit it? And then he'd edit it. And then he'd complain about a chapter. And I said, why don't you friggin' write the chapter?
Yeah, it went like that. So to be clear, and I think this is actually useful to some listeners, to work a collaboration, you have to, I think you're smart if you define the roles. And we didn't quite do that at the very beginning. But, I sort of figured there's three options here. If you think about rock music, like, the people in Springsteen's band and the people in John Bon Jovi's band, they acknowledge, hey, there's a boss and he's the CEO of the project. And the rest of us are stooges who help out. And I thought, well, that's the role for me. No, to be true to Zach's vision, right? Like, this is his book. He's got this idea. He sold it. I'm in a support role. And so you can either be the CEO or the support, or you do the partnership thing. And I figured there can only be one boss, right? Over time, that sort of became a less comfortable position. Even this morning, I phoned Zach and I say, hey, the Zoom thing's not working. And he goes, well, why don't you friggin' contact Mark Stay and talk to him about it instead of wasting my time?
I didn't say all of that out loud, but you got the gist of it.
I can read your mind.
So you mentioned rock and roll there, Bruce Springsteen, but of course, you've also got the Gallaghers in Oasis, Dave and Ray Davis in the Kinks, brothers who are constantly bickering and at each other.
Hate each other.
Creative industries are fraught with volatile sibling collaborations. I mean, Lee Child and Andrew Child seem to be doing okay for the moment. I mean, you're having fun here, but was there a frisson at some point? Zach, you started this and you're the one who sold it to the publisher. What inspired you to bring Michael on board?
Well, Michael's a really good writer. He's a much better writer than I am, and we like the same kind of books. So it was very clear that he could help out and add value. And yes, there's a lot of ups and downs along the way. But I would say, generally speaking, 80% of the time it's pretty smooth. There's some rocky parts for sure, but the book came out much, much better as a result. And there are some scenes in there that, like, I'm thinking particularly, it's a very dramatic scene where Schuller, this Nazi scientist, gets the main character, Jack Waters, onto the Z machine to sort of transport him in time and space. And this was, I think it's the best scene of the book. Mike wrote that scene largely. Mike, it was largely by yourself. There had been earlier drafts of the scene, but it took it to a whole other level. So yes, there's some tension. Mike would call me out occasionally about I need to be more of an editor to his writing, not trying to rewrite his writing or what have you. I think we smoothed over much of this. But working with family is always hard because you would say things to a family member that you might not say to other people. There's a candor that is best left aside.
Professional, to a professional level. So the advice to the listeners is, if you want to do a collaboration, go get yourself a twin brother and work that way.
And a time machine.
Seriously, there's this very, very interesting dynamic, right? That if Zach says, "Hey, watch this movie or listen or read this book," there's a 95% chance I'm going to think it's fantastic, right? And we have this common experience and common set of perceptions that's really useful for collaboration, and then you get the friction as well.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the book, because we kind of skipped over that. I want to talk about the book and how
I can't even remember what it's about.
I know the feeling. So Zach, it started with you. Where did this all begin? Where did you first come across Mittelwerk, and what happened there, and what inspired you? What made you think there's a story here?
I'm not even sure the Mittelwerk part of it, which is where the Germans built the V2 rockets underground. That actually came a little bit later in the genesis of the story. So originally it was kind of a murder mystery. It wasn't necessarily set in the past, but I always like these sort of genre blending books. And again, Philip Kerr, who wrote Berlin Noir, was a huge influence. And he died, and we thought, we're going to take that guy's spot on the bestseller list. So, I think I was just intrigued by some of the ideas around time travel, kind of woohoo, kind of slightly Lovecraftian stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to explain that stuff, because I never understood it.
Yeah, the undescribable horrors of the multidimensional, blah blah blah. But setting it in a historical context, and World War II is just such a fascinating era. And then when I read about Operation Paperclip, That is the U.S. government's recruitment of German scientists after World War II to keep them out of the hands of the Russians, and what went on at Mittelwerk. It was just fascinating. And the more research I did in that area, then it became, okay, this is a place to ground this story. And I think by the time I got to NaNoWriMo, I had the basics in place of what it would be. I also really liked Robert Goddard, English writer, if you're familiar with him, where he often intertwines past events into some kind of family tragedy and then brings it forward to the implications on the modern characters.
But wasn't this supposed to be a computer game at one point?
Yes. And in fact, the reason the Z Machine is... if you're familiar with interactive fiction, Infocom, and those sort of things, the architecture of that is called the Z Machine. And I thought, well, that's a really interesting thing. And the first version of this was actually a prototype I wrote in a programming language called Inform. And it had the first couple of scenes. It didn't necessarily have the whole historic thing to it. And then I thought, gosh, programming this stuff is really hard. Maybe it'll be easier to write a novel. And so that became, not that it's an easy thing by any means, but so it had this sort of complicated genesis. But, I always had this idea of the story. And then at some point, I mean, it didn't even have twin brothers in it originally, but that kind of became a way to enrich the characters and the story.
Excellent.
Right, what you know.
Yes, just had twins. So how was NaNoWriMo for you? What did you have? But did you have a completed novel by the end of that? And what kind of shape was it in?
Yeah, NaNoWriMo is excellent. I really recommend either taking part in NaNoWriMo or doing an equivalent from a self-discipline point of view. So NaNoWriMo is the idea is you write an entire novel, first draft, in the month of November, which is 30 or 31 days, whatever it is. So you have to write about 870 words a day. And I stuck to that schedule. I'd written the outline. I knew the characters ahead of time. I wrote interviews with the characters to help me understand their thinking. I knew who the killer was, if you will, although that changed later on. Yeah. So I think that discipline is really good. And earlier, like in the mid 90s, I trained and ran a marathon, and I ran marathons for 10 years. And writing a novel is like a marathon that just keeps going and going. It's the 126-mile marathon. But that discipline of knowing every day you're making progress is really, really valuable. And I think probably I learned more from running marathons than anything else in my life. And the most important thing was brute force approach can solve almost anything. And just having that discipline to put words on paper every single day. And even if you don't know what to write something, because it's better to have words on the paper than to have just ideas, this random idea floating in the ether.
Yeah. Well, my co-presenter, Mr. D, he's a runner, so he's going to be very happy with that analogy. He's going to pick up on that. So listeners, do check out the blog, which is mzurlocker.com, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that, because the blog is fascinating because it's very much the warts and all, ups and downs of what's going. So if I go to the April 2019 blog, you talk about the fact that in February you had a publisher by now. Maybe we can talk about how you got that publisher at a moment, but you got an editorial letter. You got a 20-page critique back from the publisher.
Hey, Zach, was this the first letter or the second letter?
This was the one that could be summarized as, "This book is crap. You guys are awful. And why don't you just listen to me?"
Mr. Stay, this was, we thought we had finished the book for the second time. And we had basically taken a holiday gallivanting around Germany to celebrate and to look at the sites of our places.
Research.
Yeah. And we were just so stupid in how we were doing this. The publisher was really correct in telling us where to get off.
Right. Okay. Because my question is, you look at the blog and you've changed the killer. There are big changes, there are structural changes. Did you ever feel that it was bending out of shape? Because this is something that we talk about in the academy a lot with people in the academy, where they're getting to a draft and it's moving away from the thing that they originally conceived, and they're making changes, and they're worried, thinking, are these the wrong changes? Do I dare keep going forward? What was going through your minds at that time about the changes that you were making?
Well, and we had a couple different editorial letters at different times, So I think we always tried to take the good elements of it and be self-critical. There were some wanderings we did in the middle section that were crap, and we removed those and started again. It was a little bit too man in the high castle kind of alt history. It had been done before. It wasn't particularly original.
There was weird stuff in there. I mean, I wrote some utter nonsense. It was hilarious.
I didn't say it. It wasn't nonsense, but it wasn't
the right tone.
It wasn't the right tone for what we were trying to do. So I think we use these editorial letters as a way to get back to the basics. So I don't think we ever felt like they were trying to steer us in a different direction. It was more like, there's a phenomenon, I think, when you have a co-writer, and particularly when you have somebody who is very like-minded, where you can pile on more ideas all the time. Yeah. And every new idea generates another idea and another idea and another idea. And then you realize, okay, we've taken this too far. And it's sort of like when U2 gets together and they keep adding more and more layers of guitar on top of guitar on top of guitar. And then at some point, Brian Eno has to come in and say, hey, strip it all back.
Yeah, I would say more than the story, what the editorial letters told us was that our process was wrong, right? So I'll give you an example. So Zach wrote this rapid draft, and then we were editing it and submitted that in for the first editorial letter. And the publisher, Adam, was like, hey, this has got to go. This has got to go. This has to be improved. This has to be improved. And then what we did is we sort of did this rapid fire. Okay, I'll start with chapter 1. Zach starts with chapter 2. And we just started jumping chapter to chapter as quickly as possible, revising and trying to maintain what we had written, and instead of just dumping large amounts wholesale.
Right.
And then we were doing this stupidity, I think, of like, let's alternate. I'll write chapters 1, 3, 5, 7. You'll write 2, 4, 6. And the letters basically said, hey, more or less start from scratch. We didn't start from scratch, and that was probably a mistake, but it was the process. I never had any doubts about the story. It was like, how the hell are we going to do this was the question.
It's interesting you mentioned the piling on of ideas. Funnily enough, at the time of recording, just last night, we had a craft coaching session on our academy. And that was my warning, because we had someone ask about, how do I get through that muddy middle? And I said, the temptation is to bring in more characters, to bring in more themes, more action, whatever, and just pile stuff on. But what that does is it just adds more complications to your story and ends up giving you more work. And very often that's the time to pause, step back and see where you are in that character's journey of change. And as you say, maybe, just strip it right back to the basics. So having gone through the process like this once already, and because this is there's going to be more in this series, I believe. Is that
yes.
correct? So what are the biggest lessons that you've learned that you're going to take with you onto the next books?
I think the key takeaway is we need to start with a more thorough outline, something approaching 30,000 words.
Yeah, we're aiming for 50.
I think part of it is a first novel, you're learning your craft. I think we're better writers now than we were when we started. I think we understand a little bit more about the structure of the kind of novel we want to write. So I think as you get better with your craft, some of those early mistakes kind of get left behind in the rearview mirror. Certainly the first novel, you tend to throw every idea you've ever had into the mix, which was a mistake. I think the process issues are probably still some things to iron out there. I actually think the idea of writing from alternate chapters could actually work.
Mm-hmm.
Mike is a little skeptical of this. But the idea, like one thing that balancing act, when you create too much of an outline, it's not fresh.
Yeah, we overdid it. And I think you're still overdoing it. Like Zach's got an outline for book 2. And I mean, it's a really interesting story, and he's kind of made it very tightly integrated. But the challenge we had was the chapters were sort of like blocks of code. And you knew this chapter has to end with this clue or this guy doing this. And I think that restrains the creativity.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Like the best scenes in the book, The Man from Mittelwerk, were not part of the outline. They kind of grew organically from the characters. And I think, I don't know exactly how to make more of that happen, but I think probably having less outline and being less rigid is important. And, there are quite a few chapters where, based on alpha readers and stuff like that, where they said, hey, we need to know more about this character or this thing. We wrote a new chapter, and it's like, oh, it had a level of freshness to it, even in the late stages of the book, where it's like, oh, that was a lot of fun to write, versus when you're slogging through an outline and you feel like you're just being held hostage by ideas that you created months earlier, and maybe you're not even in love with. During a NaNoWriMo process for a first draft, I think having an outline is useful, but you can't be a slave to the outline.
You make your brother the slave to the outline.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And this sounds I'm sure Mr. D will be sitting there nodding to this. This sounds very, very familiar as well. But it's fascinating to me that the thing I will say to you guys is, and this happens to me with every book, I will learn lessons having written a book thinking I'm not going to make those same mistakes again. And I don't. I discover all new mistakes every single time. So it's all part of the fun of the fair. It's all part of the process. You mentioned tone a little while ago, and I want to talk about the tone and the voice of the novel, because it does have, you were kind enough to send me an advanced copy, and it has that wonderful noir, hard-boiled tone to it. Punchy sentences. It's. I mean, this is the classic book. And I mean this in the most positive way. This is a good old-fashioned book. This, you're going to give this to a dad or a grandpa or an uncle, whatever. They're going to absolutely love it. How did you capture that tone, particularly with two of you writing it? How did you capture that voice and that tone?
Yeah, how did we?
Well, it is written from the first-person perspective, and so that makes it a little bit easier to capture that style. I think having read a lot of books in first-person perspective, I think it gets a little bit baked in. I think Michael also has a really good ear for dialogue, and I think dialogue helps out a tremendous amount. And, we also use the old Raymond Chandler advice, when all else is in doubt, have a man enter the room with a gun.
The gun, yeah.
and we use that many times to make a scene flow, have a little bit more action. Jack Waters, the main character, he's struggling with things. He's got this. His life is not going so well, and so there's a level of jadedness, a level of hurt that he brings, and he's trying to reconcile his past with his, of his brother who is missing, with his present, with his kind of failing relationship with his girlfriend. So I think all of that leads to a level of sort of noir character. Mike, I don't know if you have more thoughts on this.
Well, in terms of tone, I actually think there's two tones in the book at times, and so there's this, again, our character is Jack Waters. There's times when he's moody and introspective, and there's probably too many flashbacks, like he's about to do something, he's like, oh, that reminds me of the time when we were kids and I did this thing, and I listen to that song, and I'm brooding about this and that. That's Zach's writing. Thank you. No, seriously, it's like the longer psychological expanse. And my writing is not always, but tends to that smell, rotting flesh.
Very terse.
What is it? So the short bursty sentences that's me. And the editors would sometimes say, hey, like, give that a break, like try sentences with forwards in them. But that was my natural style, and Zach's natural style was a little bit of more the classic Chandler cynicism with a whole bunch of regret piled into it. And then we somehow fused it together.
Fantastic. It's a great blend. It works really, really well.
Can I offer something?
Yeah,
I think as writers, it's really important to take free gifts when they show up, right? So, I was at this party one day, and I talked to this guy who seemed to be a know-it-all, and he really was a smart guy. And he said, "Oh, detective fiction. A buddy of mine writes detective fiction." He goes, "What's your detective's quirk?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "Well, every detective has a quirk. What's your guy's quirk?" And I go, "Well, I never, like, we're on version 2 or 3. I never thought of that." He goes, "Well, what does he do?" I go, "He plays jazz music, and he's a GI from World War II." He goes, "Oh, and he's got kind of PTSD." He goes, "Oh, he should smoke pot." And I go, "What?" He goes, Yeah, he should smoke pot to cope." And it's like, wow, that's a really good idea. So when these things show up, like, and I phoned Zach or I emailed you that day, and we embraced that immediately. It's like, free gift, made the story much richer.
That's great. That's about always having your radar on as well for these little tidbits of information. I'd like to talk about the audiobook as well, because I know you guys took it seriously, and it was important to have an audiobook. Am I right thinking, Michael, you took care of the audiobook side of things?
Yeah, that was another one of those things. "I don't want to have anything to do with it, but you can go ahead," said Zach. So it seemed like a good idea at the time. And we experimented with a couple of different things. People are aware that there's these AI voices that you can get. We tested those. They just weren't good enough for fiction, in my view. And I was shocked. I think it was roughly a year ago. I just sent out an email on, I'm not even sure how I found these people, on ACX, I guess. You can contact narrators. And I sent out an email to like 10 narrators saying, "Hey, we've got this book. Can you give me a quote?" And I had replies from 9 out of 10 of them within 12 hours. So for me, that said, okay, these guys are desperate for work. They're all professional broadcasters or actors. They have really good skills. And then we did this audition process. And we were using the Mark Dawson School of Marketing ideas. So it was like, we're going to give away some free short stories. So I said, okay, do an audition. And the idea would be, whoever we select, we're going to work with them on a short story, make sure that we can work with them, and then they'll get the big novel work as well. And it worked out really well. We went through a couple of different narrators, and we screened out some people who were a bit over the top, but it worked out really well. And the prime question was, can we work with this person? And the guy we got,
Jonathan Strait.
Jonathan, he was brilliant. He was really, really good.
Yeah, and I understand he caught a few typos as well while he was... This is why you got to do the audiobook at the same time as the novel.
You should do the audiobook before you've written your real book, because he'll stop all the bad ideas from happening.
But Jonathan Strait was also, he did a fantastic job on the accents, and the German accent. The English accent, probably, Mark, it's not up to your standards, but for a Canadian, it was pretty good.
Yeah,
it's probably better than both my American and German accents, so I won't embarrass us all with that. So what's coming next, gents? Dare I ask, how is book 2 coming along?
Slow, not at all. To be honest, I'm
progress. Some progress.
I'm pretty busy with my day job right now, so
right. I'm very busy too.
We have knocked out a few short stories. So I did one recently that I sent to Mike. I have ideas for a book 2, maybe a book 3, and certainly the key characters, Jack Waters and Ashton, we want to bring back in some capacity because there's some unresolved business. So I think that's a 2023 project. Hopefully we can get time to do those things. And yeah, Mike, what are your thoughts on?
Well, so here was this funny experience. I think it wasn't clear to me what our book was really about, like as a theme, until it was finished.
Right. And
even finished on the third or fourth time. And I stepped back and I said, okay, our book really is about, for lack of a better word, evil scientists or people who really believe in science and go overboard and pursue evil things, right? Mm-hmm. So our book was based on Wernher von Braun, the guy who was the world's greatest rocket scientist and a Nazi who employed slave labor and killed people, and later worked for NASA.
Yeah,
and Disney.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah,
and our one of our evil characters is based on him. And I thought, you know what, in history, there are quite a few of these bad guy scientists. If you start to look for them, I came up with like 5 ideas of sequels. Like we could do 5 more books in this series, and we would never run out. Like historically based bad guys who go just absolutely apeshit crazy in terms of morality to pursue their science. So there's no shortage of good ideas for where to go with this.
Hey, one thing I just want to say, being part of the BXP community was super valuable. So I have been listening to the podcast for, many years. I binge listened to, every episode when I first discovered it. And there was a lot of encouragement that I got from that. And I would also encourage anyone who's writing, look, 2 knuckleheads like us, we wrote a book. Anybody can write a book. You just get that discipline and get the energy where you can from the writing community. And I also took part at VoucherCon conference. I got encouragement from authors that, I don't know why, but they were really encouraging to me. Guys like Charles Ardai, the publisher of Hard Case Crime, or Tal Klein, who's also published by Inkshares, and a whole bunch of people that, everybody struggles with their books. I met Dennis Lehane at the bar at VoucherCon, and we were talking, and he said, "Oh yeah, writing books is so hard. I don't know how to do it anymore." I was like, Dennis Lehane, Shutter Island? I said, now you tell me. But the point is, we all suffer through this process. And if you persevere and keep at it, you will get to the end and you'll have a finished product.
And you'll sell 12 books.
Yeah, at least, but it's, like, to me, it's really important to have these kinds of this outlet for creativity and bring your art out to the world. And it doesn't matter if you sell 12 books or 1,200 or 12 million. Okay, 12 million would be pretty cool.
Nice.
But the community is really helpful. And I encourage everybody to sponsor BXP. It's a great podcast, and you can learn a lot from other writers out there.
Thank you so much, Zach. And Michael, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. And I'm looking forward to book 2. I expect to see it real soon, that difficult second album. But until then, happy writing.
Then we break up.
Cheers. Thanks, Mark.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Oh man, I would love to be part of their dinner table meals, Mark. That must be absolutely hilarious. The two of them growing up, you can imagine the parents be like, oh my gosh, the banter. How brilliant is it though? I mean, what an insight. Like, talk about hive minds, and you get 2 twins. I've always been fascinated. In fact, I even started writing a book about twins because I was fascinated about how their minds kind of almost work in synchronicity with each other.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, I was talking about my daughter earlier in the show. Two of her best friends are twins. They live like
Right.
4 days down the road from us, and I get to like chat and it's just, and they like finish each other's sentences. They're like I think 16 or something, and it's just brilliant. But to write a book with a twin, I mean, how many people in the world have done that? There must be, I don't know, probably more than a handful, but there's probably not that many.
No, can't be many at all. And just to give you folks a heads up, since I last spoke to them, because Zach's been getting in touch, they've confirmed that there are French and German language editions of the book on the way. Ooh. Also, they've been experimenting with Midjourney, the AI art program, to create a graphic novel version of the book. Now, you can debate the pros and cons of AI generated art,
which we will be for many years. Yeah.
Yeah. But they sent me a link, and it looks really good, actually. And there's samples on their website. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes so you can check that out. And also the audiobook edition, and we'll talk about that later as well. They're doing a little giveaway that's for you, exclusive to listeners. So, if you, again, I'll put a link in the show notes. You can email them. You can be entered into a draw that they're running. So these guys are an industry. It's terrific. Yeah, totally on it.
Well, let's dive in and talk about a couple of things. Let's talk about NaNoWriMo to begin with, because obviously this book happened because of NaNoWriMo, which is, we've seen this a lot. I mean, we had Grant on for the main guy at NaNoWriMo very early on, didn't we, in the podcast years ago? We know a lot of people that take part. I know a lot of people listening do NaNoWriMo as well. And this is another great example of how when you just need to get that book written, when you've maybe been putting it off for too long, you just need to spend the time and just get it done. And this obviously worked for Zack, didn't it?
Yeah, the idea that brute force approach can solve almost anything, getting words on the page every day, but it isn't. I still haven't done NaNoWriMo, and I probably never will, because it's just not for me. I know we've had. I think one of our first guests, Robin Stevens, and who's huge now, absolutely massive. Her first book was a NaNoWriMo first draft, so that it clearly is a huge success, but I can't do it. It scares me, Mr. D. Just the idea of, that many words every day. Whereas I tend to go for as we know, the little and often the 200 words a day.
Yeah.
I take it smoother. And I did 380,000 words last year, so I'm doing something right.
Well, here's the thing. That's phenomenal. That's like he's doing his multiplication in his head. That's equivalent almost of 8 NaNoWriMos. I think what we tend to find with NaNoWriMo is that if you go for it and you do the 50,000 words in a month, then you need to take time off. Yeah. And it's a bit like it is a marathon. And as we know, I think Zack was saying that he did a lot of preparation for NaNoWriMo. And I think if you're going to do NaNoWriMo, preparation is absolutely crucial. Like, he had everything kind of lined up so he could just write and didn't have to think too much about, plotting things out, character backstories. He just wrote. And so, again, if you're going into NaNoWriMo, that kind of prep can really work. A bit like you wouldn't just go and run a marathon without having trained for it for a number of months. And I think, so I think as I start to kind of like learn about these different approaches to writing, and I think we're here to say to everyone, embrace every type, try it. Like if it's something that interests you, try it. But it's different courses for different horses, isn't it? And I think what we've seen with the 200-word challenge is it's if you want to try to establish a writing habit for a lifetime, that little and often tends to win the day. It's a bit like the rabbit and the hare story, isn't it? In some ways.
Yeah.
It's that little and often, and it does win the day. So, but I would say to people, if you're going to do it, definitely do preparation in advance. Yeah. Do some research. Don't just go on 31st of October and go, right, I'm going to do NaNoWriMo tomorrow.
Don't do what I did when I was 15. I did the London to Brighton bike race with no preparation. I'm 15. I've never been fitter, and it nearly killed me. So,
can I just say saddle sore by any chance?
My God, there was a point, because it goes up and down the downs, and there was a point where I was going up a hill and I was saying, Mark, never ever let yourself be talked into this ever again. Yeah, preparation is all.
Oh my gosh! I've got to tell you a quick story. One of our mutual friends, Asa, who's an insane,
amazing cyclist. Yeah,
they go off and do the Alps and stuff. And he did the Land's End to John O'Groats, and he said, like 3/4 of the way through, he was hobbling around, and he had to go see the nurse because he could barely sit on his bike. This is very crude. I should be doing this in the extended, but hey, whatever. I'm sure Asa won't mind. And he went to see the nurse, and the nurse took one look at bits and said, That's nothing. That's not even bleeding. So to anyone who's like in lycra and likes to, they'll probably appreciate that joke. But yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? So, but it's like, these are all, I say this, Mark, purely analogies, right? We're just giving analogies. You don't want to, you want to prepare little and often, and don't burn yourself out, literally. So, but it's great. And let's talk a little bit about the coding analogies. Like obviously Zach, I think it was Zach or Mike, can't remember which. They talked about like doing a bit of programming, I think maybe day job. And I love this idea of this kind of sense of writing a book is a bit like writing code for a software. So if you think of each chapter as a chunk of code, and it got me thinking about this great analogy whereby it's like you're sitting there writing you're writing the software, which is writing your book. You write chapter by chapter, but it's only when you get to the end of the book that you get to press the run button and see if the thing works or crashes. Error. And in a way, it's like coding in some ways so much easier, but it's not easier, but it's in terms of knowing what's wrong about it. You know that it's not working, so you have to find the bug and fix it. Whereas as a writer, you sometimes don't know if it's running properly. You don't know where the bug is. You don't know how to dive in and fix that line that's not working.
Yes, I mean it's. You're right. There's usually a tiny line of code, or some one tiny little thing that's out of place, and it fixes everything. That's never the case with a novel.
I know.
It's I've so just this script that I sent off this morning. Me and my co-writer, we've been writing it a year now, so we've been going around the houses. And it did all kind of lock into place this morning, thanks to the feedback we got from the producers. And it was all to do with the ending. And it was, the ending wasn't quite working. But I know that as we go forward, if it gets a director, the director will want to make changes. The cast will want to make changes. There'll be all these tiny little tweaks, but there's never ever a magic wand or an antivirus bug you can send in there to sort it out, which is why I'm not that worried about AI fiction, because so much of what we love about storytelling is are the little quirks, the little bits of humanity, the little things that don't quite work and don't quite make sense, and those things that you can't quite pin down. Or so, yeah, it's. But I appreciate, what Zach or Mike, Zamike, should we call him that? Mike, where kind of he did say that it restrained creativity, and one of the things we're going to talk about in the extended version is this idea of planning and how that can if you overplan, it can stifle things. So we'll
definitely,
talk about
it's going to be really interesting to dive into that. I like as well this idea. I've heard this analogy before about when you get a bit stuck in a book and maybe there's not enough conflict, or you're just like in that muddy middle as you mentioned. And they talked about how the Raymond Chandler approach of like have a man enter the room with a gun. And I love that. The analogy I once heard at one of my writing group sessions was, throw in an earthquake. Just completely like just chuck something like a natural disaster in there, because it can completely upend everything. And it's a great reminder, isn't it, that there's always tools when you find yourself at a dead end in a maze and you think, how have I come down here? You can have someone, a helicopter fly overboard and start shooting at you, whatever it might be.
Well, so I don't want to mention their name because it's a bit of a spoiler, but someone in the academy wrote a novel with an earthquake kind of event right in the middle of it. And it really was, oh, wow, this is really happening. and it was great because it did upend everything. Now they have the man come through the door with a gun. I don't know if it's. I've said it's Raymond Chandler, but I think it might also be Norman Mailer. I can never remember who actually said it. But this actually came up in, we had a craft coaching session on Monday with the Academy, and we were doing a whole thing about transitions between chapters. So you end a chapter and then start a new chapter. So we were looking at chapter openings and what would have come before and how to have a great cliffhanger and how to open, a chapter and keep the reader, because the purpose of chapters is, one of them is to give the reader a break. The reader goes, right, I finished my writing for the day. I'll pick that up tomorrow. And when they pick the book up again on chapter 13, how do you get them back into it? What are the little things that you can do? So we were talking about that and little things that you can, little teasers and little promises you can do to help get the reader back into the groove. And it's it was absolutely fascinating getting into that. And of course that have a man with a gun. That does, that kind of cliffhanger thing. I mean, James Patterson's made a career out of it. You read his books, and Dan Brown, it's cliffhanger, hook, constant kind of hook and bait that keeps you reading. So it's definitely worth studying.
It is, isn't it? And I remember when we were writing Back to Reality, that was something that we really latched onto, didn't we? And I remember us going through every chapter and reading that last few paragraphs and asking ourselves, Are we leaving something open here? Are we leaving a cliffhanger for them to want to kind of turn that page and keep reading? And that's a great exercise to remember to do once you've written your first draft. It's good to check in with that as well. Now, another thing that we hear a lot, and it's great to hear Zack and Mike talk about it, is the power of community. This idea of, the way that they talked about it's all suffering through the process, which, I think as these self-flagellating writers, we like to take on that kind of analogy. But it's like, going back to that idea of a marathon. A marathon is an incredible thing to achieve. It's an incredible thing to train for. And it's something that you'll remember for the rest of your life. It's something you'll be proud of for the rest of your life. It's something you'll talk about for the rest of your life. And that's why I feel the same is for a book. Like, you don't get anything in life that's easy. You have to put in the effort. It has to be hard, and you have to go through a degree of suffering to make it all worthwhile. And then once you've done the book, then you get this incredible sense of achievement. And it's like I do think it's a lifetime achievement to write a book. Even if that's all, if you write that one book, to have done that is huge. So many people don't even manage to get to that. And so that's the thing to balance it, is having that community to support you through. It's a bit like, you hear about people that do the marathon. I've never done a marathon, but I've heard about how, as you're running the London Marathon example, the thing that keeps you going is all the other people running it with you, right? And you got the crazy people in their big kind of like, bear suits raising money for some charity. But there are people who are, remember those beautiful moments, Mark, where you see, I remember there were stories of people who'd like fallen with half a mile to go,
and they pick them up and carry them.
And they pick them up and they carry them. They carry each other over the line. So we can really go deep with this analogy. And then you've got all the people lining the streets, cheering you on. And those are the friends and family who are like, how's the book going? And keep going. And we can't wait to read it. We can't wait to give you a hug at the finish line. And I think, but it is hard, and you do hit this wall, and that's why you need community. Like, you imagine running a marathon by yourself, 26 miles through London. No one knows that you're doing it. No one's there to support you. No one's there to give you a hug when you cross the finish line. No one there to pick you up or give you a drink halfway along, or whatever it might be. Yeah. And that's why community is. It's not just important; it's absolutely essential, isn't it?
I've seen it in action this very week. Someone in the BXP group, again, no names, but got an agent wanted to see their book, got very excited, and then, sorry, not for us, and everyone rallies around, and I was able to point them to another agent who did the same thing. But this is what it is. You're there to pick them up. You're there to pat them on the back and keep going, and kind of thing. Going.
And yet there was another post in the BXP team this week where somebody got 2 requests from 2 agents at the same time. Yeah. So it's like, at some point that kicks in as well. And then everyone, the thing I love about community is you've got the moments where you pick people up when they've fallen and they think, I can't keep going, I'm done, I'm knackered, why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. But you also have the moments where something brilliant happens, like they cross the finish line or they reach a milestone and everyone cheers and everyone's like, yes. And everyone feels good about sharing. We're really good about sharing the good things that happen in life, but in the community, in the right writing community, people are there to cheer you on and get inspired by what you've done rather than feel jealous or like, well, yeah, but then you do that. You do get communities where people there's a little bit too much, almost like competition. It's like who's going to finish the marathon first, and it's not about that. It's about everyone helping everyone finish the marathon.
Absolutely. I think that was the same person as well.
I think it was.
Again, no names. Because
well, if you want to find out names, come and join the BXP team. Yeah. Just sign up to, bestsellerexperiment.com/support, and you can learn about all these amazing people you've got in the group. Now, we would love to keep talking, but we're going to dive in a bit deeper on a number of things on this interview. We're going to talk about writing together. So in the extended edition of the podcast, because Mark and I have got a little bit of experience about that as well. And we've got a few things. Mark, you've got a lot of experience on many different levels. This idea of like CEO or partnership. We're going to also talk about getting your twin, not necessarily twin brother. I think that's quite hard to do for many people, but finding your twin, whether that's somebody you're going to be working with in co-writing or somebody that you work with to kind of, as a writing partner that inspires you. So we're going to go deep into that. And we're going to talk about capturing tone as well and how that works when you're writing together. We're also going to dive in and talk about this problem of idea multiplication, as we call it, when you just start stacking things up and it gets a bit too much. We're going to discuss and dissect that a bit more. Also, the problem with too much outlining, which again, Mark and I have got a lot of experience at, but something that really connected for me, Mark, in that interview that I'd never thought of before, which I want to share in the extended, and audiobook auditioning and this idea of short stories, some great advice. Again, Mark and I'll talk a little bit about, because we went through that process as well with getting our audiobook done as well. So if you are interested in any of those tidbits that we're going to dive in deeper, please join us on the extended edition of the podcast. And to do that, you simply go to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and sign up to the Chart Topper patron level, and you will get the extendeds plus all of the deep dives we've done as well. Or if you are a member of the Bestseller Academy, you get all of the extendeds, including the videos. You get all of those on the Academy. So join us on the extended. So welcome to the extended edition, folks. I'm going to dive straight in and talk about this idea of writing together. And I loved what Zack and Mike talked about. I mean, they had such a great dynamic. You can see how it works, can't you? They're taking the mickey out of each other. They're laughing, they're joking, but they definitely have got a great way of, they understand each other and they obviously have a great relationship.
And this thing of defining the roles, I think, certainly in their relationship, that is very important. And Mike said, I'm a support role. I'm there to fulfill Zack's vision. And there can only be one boss, which I think is an interesting way of thinking about it. Because when I'm a screenwriter and I'm working with a director, as I have been with Robot Overlords and Unwelcome, I'm very much a service provider. That's how I see myself. John and I sit down, we hammer out the story. He leaves me to write the script, at least he did with Unwelcome. So we have a story outline that we agree on. I go away and do a draft, and then he gives me notes and I go away and do revisions. Because for him, it's incredibly important. And we talk about this on the deep dive that we did for Unwelcome, that he has total understanding and total mastery of what's on the page. That when you get on set, everyone gets sides, which are little A5 versions of the script for just the scenes that you're shooting that day. And he says that he has to have complete understanding of the sides, because when you're a director, people are asking you a million questions a day. What color should this be? Why am I coming here? What should their costume look like? Is that door big enough? Should it be a different shade of green? he needs to be able to give answers, immediately. So when an actor says, "What's this line doing here? I don't understand it," he can say, "Well, it refers back to that thing that you said in your childhood, that blah 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 blah." Whereas he's I think on his first film, people, "Why is this line here?" And he was like, "The writer, I don't know. He's not here, and I can't ask the question. So let's give it a go." And he said he never wanted to be in that position again. So there are times when I'm the service provider, when I'm the one, kind of making sure that he's not put in that awkward position, and that I'm writing something that he can actually shoot and film as well. In other situations, I'm the lead writer, so I'm working with another screenwriter, another writer at the moment who's new to screenwriting. So I'm the lead writer. I'm taking the lead, but we are having script meetings which we record over Zoom. And she essentially, we talk about the story, we talk about this, that, and the other. It's based on her short story, so she will. It's great because she will just go, "I think this should happen and this should happen, and then we do this and blah blah blah, and then we have that." And then I listen back to the recording, and I sort of listen, because you miss so much when you have a Zoom conversation. But I record it and I make notes and I write notes up, and there was always something, it might just be a couple of things that she said that I pick up on, and then I write that and then send it to her, and then we ping back and forth, and then it becomes, whereas the thing I've got with Claire, it's her book. It's her vision. Again, I'm that kind of service provider, but I have the experience in writing a novel. So I am taking what she's written and just giving it a buff and a polish and turning it into something that looks a bit more like a novel. So, it's slightly different every time depending on who you're working with. But it was important that we figure out the weight and the balance of those roles very early on. And it's always a little bit different.
Yeah, and it can be, sometimes you have to start working together to get a little bit of experience as to what those roles should look like. But it's really important to have that conversation early on, once you both start to get a feel for like how you've naturally fallen into your roles. Again, using the analogy of the band that Zack and Mike talked about, it's easy for a band because you show up for rehearsals. Somebody's got the drum kit, someone's got the guitar and bass. And it's not like that when you co-write sometimes, unless it's established, like someone's approached someone because they have a certain experience or skill, and it's very much established from the outset that this is going to be the relationship. It's definitely a CEO, relationship or a partnership relationship. But I think it's important to be able just to kind of think about the labeling of the roles that people have within the writing process, because if you don't, that can be the cause of friction when it's undefined and people kind of think, and you get that little you get those crossovers where people both think they're the CEO, then you get the friction, and then you get the kind of challenges, right?
Let's talk about back to reality then, because I think we had to find that out as we went along, because I remember you saying early on, because you'd spoken to Shannon Mayer, and Shannon had just co-written a novel with another author, another best-selling author, and they had a thing where Shannon would write one chapter and then leave it on a cliffhanger for the other. Yeah. And they did that back and forth. And you said, should we try that? And the thing is, this was the thing that Shannon was doing. There were two New York Times best-selling authors who'd written lots and lots of novels, sort of sparring almost. And I thought, that's not going to work with us because, I had more experience and this was your first novel. And so we had to find a way in which to work. And it was, which is why I think we ended up with that big outline, and we'll talk with lining towards the end. And I know we make jokes about it, but I think that outline was really important, because I think it was really important that both of us were singing from the same hymn sheet. Both of us knew exactly where that story was going and where the story beats were and what was going to happen and when, so that there weren't any surprises, because if there were, I don't think we'd have done it in 12 months. I don't think we'd have done it in 12 years.
I think I'm sure there are many people out there that have tried it where it hasn't worked. I mean, we've talked about, we have the Urlockers on telling us about the success of their book, and we got Back to Reality done and we got it out there. But, for every one of those books that gets finished, I bet you there's like 20, 30, 50 books that are still sitting there and they've just kind of like got stuck and it's always going to be down to the challenges in defining the relationships. And so what I loved about this idea of twin. I mean, get a twin brother, they jokingly
twin,
said.
yeah.
But actually, it's a good question, because it's like, well, actually find your twin. But knowing that what you're ultimately trying to do is find a partner who complements your strengths and you complement their strengths, but you're not like carbon copies of each other, because there'd be it's got to be greater than the sum of the parts ultimately when you bring two people together.
Absolutely. I mean, John and I are very similar. There's only a couple of years between us, very similar tastes in films and the kind of stories that we want to make. John is very much a details guy, and I'm very much I like dialogue. I love dialogue. That's my big strength in the relationship between me and John. John struggles with dialogue. I think he'd admit that, So we would go back and forth, and he would say, "I'd like to tweak this line of dialogue. Is this okay?" kind of thing. And then one of the last things he does before he goes into production is he will go through and put camera moves in and little cuts and little things that as a director are essential to him, which I wouldn't feel comfortable going, let's have a dolly shot here or something like that. Let's have a crane shot. I'm not going to start telling him how to shoot his film. So it's you do definitely play to your strengths there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's actually quite good as well. Like we defined, didn't we, early on in Back to Reality, what the things that we loved, shared interests that helped us discover.
That was really helpful.
That
really
was huge.
helpful,
But on top of that, I think and we didn't really do this, I don't think, but it's a great tip for people who are working with someone that they haven't worked with before in that capacity is actually define your weaknesses. Say what you're not good at. Say what you don't enjoy doing. And if the other person's like, well, I love doing that, then it's like bingo. Like we've found something where we're going to be. So sometimes it's not about being CEO and assistant or vice president of the book writing process. Sometimes it's about who's CEO of dialogue, who's CEO of refining the plot points, who's CEO of cliffhangers, and if you can kind of break that down a little bit, then it definitely leads to a much more successful project. And also working out if you're the right team to be working together. Because again, sometimes it's like you go out on a date and just, they're nice, but you just don't really feel that connection. And that's okay. Right? It's okay.
The strengths thing is interesting, particularly if you're thinking of going into screenwriting, because you do get, it only really happens with really experienced screenwriters. But if you've been around for a long time, people will know, so-and-so, they're great with one-liners, or they're great with dialogue, and let's get them in to do a punch-up on dialogue. Which is why on some, like a film like Armageddon had a phenomenal number of screenwriters on it, because they would get people in and say, you're the guy who can focus on this thing, so just do that. Which does explain why a lot of movies end up a complete bloody mess, but it does happen.
There is a danger. Yeah.
I think the equivalent is if you're looking for beta readers, and if you're writing a thriller, don't necessarily give it to your romance writer friend, because you want to give it to your thriller writer friend and say, look, what the things I'm getting wrong here in terms of writing a thriller, what the tropes, what the cliches, what the things I should avoid, get that specific feedback from an expert in their field, or at least someone who has strengths in that field.
Yeah. Now you wanted to talk about capturing tone as well.
Yeah, this kind of follows on from the collaboration thing. And what I thought was interesting was, you've got that 50s noir tone in their book. And it is very much that kind of Raymond Chandler kind of feel. But what I loved is you've got two authors there. Mike writes the short, punchy sentences that give it that kind of boom, 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 boom kind of hit. And Zack was a bit more verbose and maybe a bit more florid. And he said, somehow we fused it together, which I thought was really, really nice. And that's it's great when you can make that work, because tone is something that needs to vary, I think. You don't want I know critics seem to love consistent tone. And if you look at the reviews for Unwelcome, the thing I get is, tone is all over the place. But I don't want it to be one consistent thing.
Yeah.
You know, people will have a laugh. People will be terrified. Strange things will happen, you know. So I love to see a variation in tone, not wildly, but, you know, you do need to see, you know, you need moments of light, you need moments of dark shade and, you know, and what have you. So it's important to work on that. But if there are two of you working on it, then you, again, play to your strengths there. If there's someone who can do the noir, punchy, you know, sentences, if that's what you're looking for, then that's their role.
Well, I'm going to just drop this in as well, because I was just having as you do, I was having a conversation with a trailer composer the other day, who happened to write the trailer for a very, very big recent Disney movie that became the biggest watched trailer of all time. I'll just put that out there just to reference this. He said the most important thing that you can have in music, and we also were talking about writing and the analogies between two. He said the most important thing you can have is contrast. So everything you're talking about, Mark, about, you know, tone being the same, that's a flat line. What you want is you want that switching of contrast, because it's the contrast that creates the emotion, and it gets people like, whoa, and it's like the man coming in with a gun, you know, anything that causes contrast is really good. So that's a whole deep dive in itself. But I just thought I'd throw that in there because it definitely makes sense.
Yeah. Trailers are fascinating because they have to capture the essence of something in 30 seconds. I mean, when you get to those,
it's a skill, isn't it?
It's great. The Unwelcome trailer I've seen go from, I think the first trailer was nearly 2 minutes long. Then there was a 30-second one. And then there's a 10-second one. And then there's just the things that end up on, you know, Instagram, which is just blah. And
short.
Exactly. And each one has to somehow capture the essence of the film. Yeah. And it's a real skill. Oh, and gosh. I think we can learn a lot when we're writing, as novelists, when we're writing blurbs. You can learn a lot from trailers. I know that's people go, trailers have spoilers in them. This is not new. Trailers have always had spoilers in them from the very beginning. They've always said to the audience, relax. This is a romance where they fall in love at the end. This is a war movie where the good guys win. You know, they say to you, this is what you're getting. You know, this is, and you have those contrasts, those ups, those downs, those peaks, those troughs, but they also capture the essence of it. And I think we can learn a lot from trailers.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. Now, Zack and Michael had talked about this idea of idea multiplication. This idea. I was, do you know, the analogy in my head was it Fantasia? Is that the one with Mickey Mouse and the and the broom,
the mops?
The mops. That's right. And I think that's a really good analogy to hold in our mind. It's why do we get into writing? Why do we get into writing? Because we have these massive imaginations. Like we have tons of ideas. Like who doesn't have 16 books they want to write? And I think that happens within the book as well. Like that's how many ideas keep stacking, because it's like an open door, isn't it? It's like an exponential growth. The more ideas you put on the table, the more permutations that can come from each of those ideas, and they just keep expanding. And we do end up like Mickey Mouse in the castle there, with like how many millions of mops flying around. And I think it's something that we need to be aware of, because it's a trap that I think a lot of people do early on, and you have to tame. I think for me, it's about allowing the ideas, like go for it, like write down as many crazy ideas as you think, but then you have to have what I call the subtractive, in music I call it subtractive mixing. It's where you actually have all of the sounds, and it's a cacophony, it's a noise.
More cowbell.
Exactly. Like, let's layer some more guitar, let's have another drum. And the great thing about music, again, it's like the analogy we talked about earlier with coding. It's easy with coding. You press the run button and the machine breaks, and it's like nothing happens. You can't do that with a book. But with music, you see, when I sit down to write music, I can hear it getting too much. And there's an effect for any musicians out there, they'll know what I'm talking about. There's an effect called reverb. And reverb is absolutely essential to make your music sound beautiful. If you ever hear a raw vocal, like you get the best vocalists in the world, you get Adele, you get Beyonce, and you just get their raw vocal with no reverb on it, it sounds like dull. I mean, it sounds nice, but it
sounds
doesn't
great,
sound professional. It doesn't sound like what you hear on the radio.
There's a reason concert halls are that big.
Exactly, right? So what we do as musicians, as producers, is we add reverb to everything. We add reverb to vocals, we add reverb to strings, to piano. And it's the thing that, reverb is the thing that makes it sound big. It's the kind of the kind of space that it creates. But reverb is a dangerous tool. Because if you use it too much, because basically it carries the sound, you get all these sounds stacking on top of each other. And what you end up with is this complete horrible mess where you can't hear anything. And if anyone's ever been to a concert and there has been a bad sound engineer at the back of the room trying to mix everything and turning everything up and everyone's like, up, I can't hear. Oh no, I can't hear. And it becomes this cacophony of noise. And I remember seeing Air, one of my favorite bands, the Air French band, as they call them.
Yeah, love them.
America, because Air, there's already an Air in America. Air French band over here. That's what they're called. But Moon Safari, I mean, classic album.
Brilliant album.
Absolutely amazing album. But I saw them in concert and this happened. The noises, just the reverb, and it was a mess. And I was so disappointed. I was like, God, these are my idols musically, and I couldn't hear anything. But again, in a book, you can't hear the reverb. And that's the reverb is this multiplication of ideas where it just becomes this mess. And the reader's like reading it going, God, I can't focus on anything anymore. There's just too much going on and there's too many things happening.
This comes up in the Academy a lot, particularly with authors who are getting into the middle act of their story, because the first 20, 30,000 words of a story is lots of fun because you're introducing characters, new situations, new challenges, blah, 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 blah. And then when you get to the middle act, you can get a bit stuck and you just think, okay, I'll have a new character. I'll have a man come through the door with a gun. I'll have a new character come in. I'll have a new thread. We'll bring in a new theme. We'll have the earthquake kind of happen.
Yeah.
We'll have, and then you start piling stuff on, which, can work once. A bit of cowbell, is great. A bit of reverb on the guitar, wonderful. It's, a bit of reverb on the voice, fantastic. But like you say, if you just start piling it on, suddenly you've got this mess of new ideas, and then you've somehow got to wrap them all up in the third act as well, in the finale. And this is a problem that a lot of writers have is they get to their middle act and they just keep piling stuff on. So the thing that I've learned is if you do start getting stuck is not to say, what can I add that's new? Look at what you've got and say, how can I make this work harder? Is this working hard enough? Is that character doing what it needs to do? Can I dig deeper? And it's about, because one of the reasons as well that people get to 20, 30,000 words into the novel and they get stuck is because you're now making story choices that have big consequences. You're now saying, okay, so he's going to murder, the woman he's having an affair with, but, oh, God, that means I can't have her come back. And then she's gone. And then, oh, God, what happened? Big consequences. And it can be crippling, particularly if it's your first time around. Although it still happens to me, happens to every writer I know when you go, oh, okay, if we do this, everything's going to change. Okay, are we willing to? And it gives you pause. So it's that thing of something we've talked a lot about recently is writing without fear and then going back and fixing it. This script I've just pushed out today, the producers came back and said, we're not sure about the opening. We want to try a new opening. And they gave us some idea of what they wanted the opening to be like. So we went back, spent a week completely rewriting the opening. Quite different, much more elaborate. Worked really, really hard on it, sent it to them. No, we like the original opening. So we went back we made one or two tweaks that made it slightly different, but which we learned about by going down that dead alley. Yeah. So I'm now at a point where I'm like, I don't mind. I went down, we spent a week working on it, didn't work, but I learned a couple of things doing that and I brought them back with me. And the opening is now essentially the same, but is stronger. And, I learned more about the character from doing it as well. So don't worry about, don't worry about getting it wrong, particularly in that middle act, because I think there is a danger that there's a temptation just to pile more stuff on. And when you do that, sometimes as well, you can you can start moving away from the original concept to a point that it bends out of shape as well. Whereas the things that are working in your first act are the things that are going to push you through that second act. So just look back at them. Look at what you've got already before you pile stuff on and say, can I make this work harder?
Yeah. Yeah. Can I still see and hear the original things coming through as well? And it's not muddied out. And it is a case of letting stuff go as well. I think, you have to look at things in a hard and fast way and just say, what are the best ideas out of this number of ideas I've got, and allow yourself to like park the other stuff. Maybe use that in a future book, but pull the really, really strong themes through and leave the rest. Now, Zack and Mike also talked about this idea of outlining and how outlining can be something which, if you've got too much of an outline, they were talking about, it can
wouldn't know anything about that, would we?
Well, we know nothing about that, do we? So we can't. But this idea of it being less fresh when you write, I'd never really thought of it like that, and it's actually the whole debate that's been going on, this whole idea about plotting and pantsing. People who like to be 100% pantsers, they like the thrill of discovering what happens as they write. But yeah, there is a thing about, as Zack or Mike mentioned, like being held hostage to your plot.
Yeah, and I see both sides of it. I do have to, I still, as a screenwriter, I still have to outline things. You have to outline stuff and send pitches, but the way I see it now is an outline is a very, very thin first draft. I think you can still allow yourself to be surprised and still allow yourself to, it's the only way, I think it's the only way to think of it really, is it's a really, really thin first draft. And then you start layering stuff on, glomming stuff on. I mean, you do have that thing of, as you discover who your characters are and they can surprise you and you can think, oh, okay, they've made this decision, which means that everything that I've already outlined, it's not going to work. So the temptation is to bend them back to fit in with the outline. And I think that's a mistake. I think if you allow yourself to be carried by the character rather than the outline, because otherwise you end up with a character that's dragged along by the outline and doesn't have as much agency and it's less engaging and the story becomes a bit stale. So, I can see both sides of that. But I mean, in my early stuff, you were talking a few weeks ago about embarrassing early stuff that's never got made that I've written, and I've got a time travel script which I outlined really, really heavily. And it had lots of great moments in it. I was like, great, I want this bit with that, because it was about a sort of breach in time in London, and we have dinosaurs and Roman centurions, and we actually have a rock concert in Hyde Park with Jimi Hendrix, and loads of late, no longer with us musicians, And I had all these kind of little tent poles in the story. And then I was trying to cram the characters into it, and it was a mess. It was a right old mess. Might make a good Doctor Who one day. And, lesson learned from that. That's and I understand the temptation, and I totally know what Zack or Mike was talking about. Yeah. Sorry, guys.
But ultimately, it's there's no hard and fast rules to this. It's about you finding where you are along the continuum of how much you want to outline. It's good to over outline, because like you just said, Mark, until you've overdone something, you don't realize you've overdone it. It's like you've overtuned your guitar, you pull it back a bit and you find the sweet spot. You have to go past that point. So go for it. Like go for it, make mistakes and then pull it back. And that's how we find our sweet spots in everything in the writing.
I mean, that music, I've made music, and if you got something like GarageBand, 99 tracks or whatever, you are just let's have a bit more snare, let's have a bit more, and then you listen back and it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a mess,
I can't hear anything.
Whereas when I started out, I'd like a secondhand 4-track Tascam 4-track, and you could only have 4 tracks. And it's great. It's terrific, because you have to get it right in just 4 tracks with maybe more with a bit of bouncing.
But then you can bounce them down, Bounce them down, eventually, you bounce the 4 tracks down to 1 track, then you have 3 tracks left, and you can bounce those down. So there does actually be a limit. But no, you're absolutely right. Talking of music, Mark, just as a little aside, I'm writing again. I've got tracks.
Yeah?
Yes.
Do you need a guitarist?
And just to tie this in, so it doesn't sound like a shameless plug, to tie it in, I am absolutely limiting myself to a set number of sounds that I can have playing at any one time, because
Right.
I'm actually creating it's not minimalist, but it's certainly not like crammed full of stuff just because it's got a lot of space in it. Yeah. So I was thinking at some point when it's on its way out, we maybe slap it on the end of one of the episodes and people
Do it.
hear.
Love it. Yeah.
Little
No,
outro,
can't wait.
little new outro music. That's what we call it for
Excellent.
experiment podcast.
Can't wait.
Yeah, it's all good. All exciting stuff. Let's talk now about the auditioning and audiobooks, because this was a fascinating thing. When I heard them talking about this, I thought, yeah, we've been there, but I love their idea of trying out an audition with all the different people that wanted to read their audiobook with a short story. What a fantastic way of approaching it.
Yeah, very good idea. I know they dabbled with AI as well. And we've got an episode coming in a few weeks with Jane Davis, who did exactly that. So stay tuned for that. She did an AI audio, and you can actually listen to a clip of it. So you'll be able to hear that. But yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, when we auditioned for Back to Reality, I can't remember how we did it. We had several sort of short excerpts, didn't we? And
we gave them something to read
because we had accents as well that we wanted to get right. And Kim Breton, who narrated, does such a good job with Back to Reality. She just nailed it every time, didn't she? And that's so yeah, it's a great idea. It's a great idea. And I think the thing with Zack and Michael as well, they're building a greater universe too. There are going to be other books, and they talked about comic books, and they talked about a computer game. So who knows where it could end up? So it's the kind of thing where you want to get it right. You don't want to get the wrong narrator early on, because that can be disastrous.
Yeah, and it is about, sometimes especially if you're thinking of writing series or characters, you're looking for somebody that you're going to build a long-term relationship with potentially, because there's something nice about having the consistency of a narrator, following through, if you like, and I know that happens a lot with books. So, but yeah, if you're thinking of doing an audiobook, definitely recommend doing that. So that comes brilliant, like extended. These are getting longer and longer, aren't they? We're talking about pulling things back. We're gonna have to focus in ourselves. But we hope you've enjoyed this extended. And by the way, folks, thank you. We want to just always say this. Thank you so much. If you're listening to this, it means you're supporting the podcast or you're part of the Academy. And so we just want to say we really appreciate you being a part of this journey. We hope you're enjoying the extendeds. And one thing we'd like to ask is, if you are enjoying them, please let your friends know about them and tell them to subscribe and get them to sign up, because we would love to build those numbers of people supporting the podcast. So thank you very much.
Thank you, folks.
So, Mark, what's happening on socials this week?
Laura, good news. There's some really good stuff. Kate Baker, whose novel Made of Steel is either out or about to come out. Forgive me, Kate, I've forgotten. But you'll love this. You'll love this, Mr. D, because this is just about crossing that threshold, is doing that scary thing. She put on the BXP group, she went, oh my word. So a few days back, I walked into the Ipswich Waterstones and spoke to the manager. She took him a copy of the press release from her novel Made of Steel and a paperback copy and a handful of bookmarks. And she said, I attempted that juggling thing of asking for something without asking, so to speak. And he was impressed with the book, and he read the blurb, and he said, I'll speak to the team. And she kind of thought, I don't know, maybe he's just fobbing me off. Anyway, he just emailed her, and she's now doing a 2-hour book signing on publication day. 28th of February. There we go. From noon till 2 p.m. at Waterstones in Ipswich, because she just walked in with a book and some bookmarks. And now Kate says, obviously no one will come. So folks, Tuesday, 28th of February, noon till 2. I can't make it.
Fill the shop.
Yeah, I'm going to the signing at DIS, Kate. I know she's doing a signing at DIS a little while later, so I'm hoping to go to that. But yes, Waterstones, Ipswich, Tuesday 28th, noon till 2. Let's fill that store.
Bestseller experimentees podcast experiments listeners. Okay, let's do this. Do you remember that? Do you remember that thing on Twitter? It's happened again, isn't it? Like even last week, there was a thing on Twitter about somebody said that their dad had written this book in 2012.
Oh, I saw that. Yes,
and then it went
TikTok,
viral
wasn't
on
it?
TikTok.
TikTok.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Twitter.
Yeah.
And it went viral on TikTok, and the book shot to the number one position in the crime. I think it was the crime charts in the US on Amazon.
It's amazing.
So maybe this is our own little version of that. Let's completely overwhelm. Let's all head to Ipswich, Waterstones. If you're anywhere within the county of Suffolk or even Cambridgeshire, get in the car and go meet Kate, because Kate is absolutely
she's
brilliant.
Amazing. She's brilliant.
She's
Star in the making.
She is absolutely brilliant. Like everything about Kate we love. She's in the academy. She's just really great and very humble with it as well. But I think she definitely deserves great support. So if you're able to get down to Waterstones, 28th, you said 28th of February, still time.
Tuesday, 28th of February, noon till 2.
Noon till 2. Go and support Kate, and then hopefully we'll get a bit of a fun story of what happens after that. But anyway, good luck with that, Kate, and congratulations. And you know what? Go for it. I think I remember seeing that post on the Facebook page there, and I thought to myself, I said to her, if you don't ask, right? If you don't ask, you don't get. And you just have to do it. We've had it with people getting, features in their local papers. Like start local. If you don't have to go to the number one in the charts. You start with your local papers, your local bookstores, and even if they are chains, and you think, Waterstones can't get in there, or Chapters or whatever, they do. We did a 2-hour book signing in Chapters, and it was great. We sold a ton of books. Like random people walking past, going, "Oh, what's this?" Yeah. So. Good luck. Brilliant.
Did I tell you I got on BBC Southeast News?
I haven't seen it. You said that you were getting filmed.
What a stitch up. Right, no, bless them. They were lovely. They came here. They filmed me here. I'll see if I can dig the clip up. But how they take one thing out of context.
Oh, no. They interview for 2 hours and you get like a 15-second soundbite.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. Yeah. That's exactly. I spoke to them for about an hour, talking me for an hour, as if I could do that. How difficult was that?
I know. How did you have that much to say, Mark?
I know, exactly. But I said one thing, which is absolutely true. Warner Brothers paid, I think, £1.1 million for the script for Unwelcome, which is the most Warner Brothers UK have ever paid for a horror movie script. And I also said I was skint when I sold the script, which is true, that I was down to my last 200 quid, sold the script. Great. But the £1.1 million goes to the film's budget. Doesn't come to me.
I was going to say, hello,
but
Mark.
If you were to watch this clip, it was like, look, he had 200 quid and now he's a millionaire, Rodney.
No. Oh my God.
I was like, oh my God. And the thing is, you start getting comments on Facebook, people going, good for you, Mark. Well done. You deserve that. I said, no, I'm still skint. That was.
You start getting all these distant cousins and relatives coming.
Let us a fiver.
Mark. Yes. It's like family member wins lottery, except they didn't. Oh my gosh! And that was that the one clip that they led
went
with.
Round.
Yeah,
John, the director, he was creased up with that. He was like, "Yeah, you've been stitched up. Well done, mate. Good one."
Do you know what's so funny? Is the same week, Mark, that you were on South. It was BBC Southeast News, wasn't it? A mutual friend of ours from school, Mark Stockhausen. Did you hear about this? He was on Channel 4 News. Channel 4 News. Stocky. It was the lead article about the recession. It was like they were talking about it's a strikes and Sunak and the government, blah, blah, blah. And they wanted to interview somebody who's kind of at the forefront of like the public sector. Like Mark Stockhausen owns a number of pubs. And he's a landlord, right? So he sees like he gets to meet the clientele, and he knows how hard the economy's hitting his business stuff. And do you know what they did to stitch him up? Absolutely brilliant. So they just picture this scene, folks. Pub landlord, and Mark will laugh at this. We've been jibing him all month about it. The Channel 4 News get him filming. They say, we just need some like cutaway shots and stuff before we do the interview. Can you throw some darts at the dartboard? He's not a bad dart player, but he's there in his suit. Right, he's wearing a suit. So, who wears a suit when you play darts? You need t-shirt, big fat belly, and a pint of beer and a fag, right? So, cigarettes. Sorry, folks. That was my British bit. Anyway, so Stocky is on the oche, and he's got the cameras on him, and he's like trying to throw darts, and he can't hit the dartboard. He can't hit it. It's like the darts are going everywhere, and the bit that they show on the news is him pulling a dart out of the wooden part above the bottom. And the comment from the guy filming is, "Oh, I hope your beer's better than your dart playing." And that's the first bit you hear on the interview.
Send me a clip. Send me a clip.
Stitched him up. And oh my God, I've never laughed so hard.
They asked me, they said, "Oh, can we," because you have to do the noddies, right? The noddies.
The nods, yeah.
And once you know this happens, you'll never watch the interview the same way again, because what they do is because they only have one camera, but it looks like a 2-camera thing.
Yeah, they switch.
So they'll switch around and you'll be sitting there nodding as if you're listening to the other person and they're not actually saying anything, and the interviewer does it too. So whenever you see someone nodding, they're not actually listening to the other person. It's something they did 5 minutes after the interview. But they also asked me to write. So I sat down and I wrote at my desk, and there's a clip of me writing. And what I'm writing...
That's not stereotypical, of course. Is it?
No, exactly. And what I'm writing in my notebook, and I've got it here somewhere. I've got it. Where is it? It's something like, "You were writing this while you were being filmed by BBC South News. You were writing this," and I'm just doing that over and over again, like Jack Nicholson in The Shining, which is in my Shining notebook as well.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. I'll dig a clip out and I'll put it.
I can tell you some stories. But I've got so many TV stories. I've been on TV a lot, bizarrely. Location. I was on that show.
Really?
Yeah. Years ago, right? So for anyone not in the UK, this is kind of like the extended of the podcast. Now we're going into our lifelong stories, but this is a funny story. I was on the sofa with Kirsty and Phil talking about my property business, because I was like trying to change the world with my how people bought and sold property in the UK. And the funniest bit, I was standing there watching the woman before me get filmed, and we're in some kind of warehouse. I got spray on makeup, Mark. They sprayed on foundation. I'm like, what the hell are you doing to my face? I look like Mudman. It was the weirdest thing. Anyway, so Kirsty and Phil are sitting on the sofa with this other woman, and this other woman's talking about her eco project that she's got, and it's really interesting. And out of nowhere, like, there's a ton of people. There's this camera on this like semicircular track that they're going to zoom in around, get really funky shots on Channel 4, and it's all really set up, and like the rest of the place around the outside is like a complete mess. It's like some like metallic factory warehouse, but the set looks amazing and everything around it's like rusty and horrible. But out of the corner of my eye, this woman walks out with cans on, with headphones, and she's like, stop after 10 minutes of filming. And I thought, oh, someone said something really bad, and they've advertised something, they've got to like pull it back, and they've got to refilm it. And the woman said, I kid you not, director, she said, "Darlings, I've just been watching it on the screens in the room, and I can't remember the lady's name, just call her Sarah. Sarah, you're crossing your legs exactly the same way as Christy, so I just need you to shift around, and maybe you could like swivel around this way and look." And I thought, oh my God, because what you see on TV is like this really nicely polished, 3-minute segment, and they just like ditched like 10-15 minute interview because she had her legs crossed the same way. And I thought, oh my, it's like, it was a bit like my spray on fake tan that I had. It's like what you see is not what you get. Brilliant.
We need a clip. Send me a link for a clip. We've got to watch that. Anyway, back to social media.
I was going to say, if anyone's got any stories about their TV experiences, send them in. We'll read them out. It's all good fun. Brilliant. Especially if it's about your book. Brilliant.
Yes.
Sorry, back to social media, Mark.
Keep it on theme. Another bit of celebrating. Elizabeth Hurley, who's a member of the BXP team as well. She said, "Today I published the conclusion of my Quantum Curator series." She says, "More to come, but this arc is complete." And she says, "I genuinely couldn't have done it without this group. Many of you read my first book as beta readers and assured me it wasn't," a rude word. "From there, my confidence grew." And she says, "With help from Mark Stay and Julian Barr, because we both worked on them as editors. At least I did. I didn't do the first one. I did the 2, 3, 4, and 5. The series went from strength to strength. I'm so happy to have got to today." And they are an amazing series. If you like time travel, history, it's about these people from a parallel universe who come to our universe and rescue artifacts. It's great. The Quantum Curator series, she writes them as Eva St. John. I'll put a link in the show notes. You can find them. And they are rollicking good fun, terrific characters, brilliant sense of history. Really, really enjoyed them. And last but by no means least, Morgan Delaney. Again, I've worked on this book with Morgan as well as editorial capacity. The Squared Circle, which is an Lumiere sisters adventure. And this is, it's so much fun. A bit like The Witches of Woodville, set in a strange little village where weird stuff happened. You've got werewolves, quantum physics, vigilantes, moving statues. It's wonderful. It's coming on March 1st, so it's available for pre-order now. So I'll put a link in the show notes. You can check that out as well. So again, members of the Academy of the Bestseller Experiment group on Facebook, smashing it out of the park.
Smashing it out of the park, guys. Congratulations. So brilliant to hear. And every week, it's like it's just this constant conveyor belt of new books being finished, new books being released, and amazing stories. So don't forget, folks, if you've had something that you want to celebrate with us in your life, because life should be about celebrations, right? It should be about celebrations. So we want you to get in contact with us and tell us about something good that's happened in your life. Let us share it with everyone. Not only will it be fun to hear us chatting about you on the podcast, because we love that. This is our favourite segment. And I'm going to say this out loud. I've just suddenly wondered after 6 years if people think we're paid to like we are just celebrating.
We shouldn't we? Oh God,
I just suddenly thought we completely missed out, Mark. I mean, bloody hell, folks! Like, why didn't someone? No, all of these. These are just stories that people are sending us in. So, if you've been holding back, thinking this is some sponsored segment of the show, it isn't. Just tell us your news. We love to celebrate, and we love.
Not yet, it isn't.
Not yet. Yeah. Okay. Let me just clap, and we'll redo the segment. So, folks, for a limited time only. No. I'm serious. We want to celebrate your successes. So, if you have something to share, please let us know. Not only because it'd be fun to hear your name on the podcast, but also it inspires everyone else to follow suit. I can't begin to tell you the amount of people who've told us, "Oh, I heard you mention about that person, and I was really stuck at that point, and they went through a similar thing with me, and now I finished my book." So again, knock-on effects for everyone. You're serving the writing community by celebrating your successes. So go to the website, bestsellerexperiment.com. Go find the Contact Us form. That's at the top of the navigation. Click on that and send me and Mark a message, and we get all of those messages to us. Tell us about something that you want to celebrate, big or small.
Absolutely.
So
on social media as well, you can contact us there. Facebook, we're Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram, we are at Bestseller XP. And if you've enjoyed this episode or any of the episodes, you've been inspired by them, give us a rating on your podcatcher. 5 stars. Why not 5 stars? A little review, maybe something nice, just to make writers out there thinking, are there any good podcasts for writers out there, especially ones set in the UK? That's us. Send them our way, and subscribe as well. That always helps too.
And we'll also say as well, like, thank you to everyone who watched the YouTube video of Richard Armitage. It's gone viral, as we said. If you haven't checked us out on YouTube, please come and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Simply go to YouTube and type in Bestseller Experiment, and you will find a ton of videos. And if you've never seen me and Mark on camera before, it's just worth it just to kind of get the randomness of us chatting across the continents, me in Canada, Mark in the UK. So come and check out a YouTube video, leave a comment, but do subscribe, and then you'll get notifications of everything that we put out via there as well, folks. Anyway, Mr. Stay, another cracking episode. It's been a lot of fun. Oh my gosh, reminiscing. Too many. Oh goodness, it's like it's been down the pub with the Marks, isn't it? It's becoming a bit like this show.
Kind of, yeah. I mean,
I think it's meant to be like that.
No darts.
No darts, though. Absolutely, someone could get very injured if I started throwing darts around, especially after a few gin and tonics or large shandies. But brilliant. Have a fantastic writing week, folks. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We so much appreciate you journeying with us and us journeying with you. And until we meet next week. Until next time, it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2. A goodbye.